All right, let's go ahead and pop open Blender. Blender is one of the two softwares we're using in this course. It's an amazing software. It's perfect. It's open source. It's free. It's completely high-end professional. It's not a Mickey Mouse software, that's for sure, and it's just one of my favorites. I love Blender. And hopefully some of you will love it enough just like I do. I use this in my spare time. It's just such a fun program to play around with. You can pretty much do anything you want. We're going to use it for mainly 3D modeling and a little bit of animation later on. All right, so anything I do, you should do. So you have Blender open. We're going to spend the first part of this course working with Blender, understanding the basics, and hopefully getting to a point where if I said, I need a chair, and you make me a chair, and you just have the expertise to make that in Blender, which is a pretty cool feeling, just to be able to recreate objects at your own will. So I'm excited. I hope you are too. This is such a cool software. So once again, anything I do, you should do as well. All right, so when you open up Blender, you're going to see this kind of main page. Just click away from there, and it'll go away. We don't need that screen. All right, let's try not to overload you with information. The couple things you need to do is first, this is your viewport. This is the all the meshes and all the stuff that you're working on. If you press and hold the scroll wheel on your mouse button, so don't scroll in. I mean, you can scroll in, you'll zoom in. And if you scroll out, that's pretty self-explanatory. I'm sure you've done that in many different softwares. But if you actually press it and move the mouse, so you're pressing and holding that middle mouse button while also using your hand to kind of spin yourself around. That's really all we need to know for this particular first introduction video. Zoom out, zoom in, and kind of pan around whatever mesh it is that you're working on. Of course, we're panning around the origin, but I feel that is a topic for another day. Let's keep it simple. So let's just first start fresh. So in our scene right now, we've got a camera, which we don't need to talk about at all. We've got a light, which we don't need to talk about at all. And we've got a cube. Let's delete that as well. So I'm just pressing delete on my keyboard. I've got a completely clean canvas now with absolutely nothing in this Blender file. Let's go ahead and start creating a object. So I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to press A on my keyboard. That will pop open the Add menu. And if you haven't been able to tell already, you can see any key presses I'm pressing at the top of the screen there. Just in case my speaking isn't clear enough. So Shift A, and I'm going to add a mesh. 90% of the time we're going to be adding meshes. There's a lot of stuff we can add, but let's just keep it simple. Let's go ahead and add a cylinder. Now before you press anything, anytime you add a mesh, or 90% of the time you add a mesh, you will see this little pop-up. And this lets you basically be more specific about the mesh you added. For example, cylinder is not perfectly smooth. It's actually just a bunch of rectangles. Nothing in 3D modeling is ever perfectly smooth. It's all an illusion, which we'll talk about later. So you could make it more smooth by giving it more vertices, which gives it more faces, but just keep in mind with 3D modeling, the more faces, the more edges, the more triangles you have, the more your computer has to work to basically graphically produce this. So let's keep it at 32, and you know what? Actually, let's just keep it at 16. Let's really kind of make that cylinder look a little bit boxy. Actually, I'm going to go to 12. There we go. There you have it. You've added a mesh. Now, obviously, we've only got so many meshes to play with, and of course, we can go in and we can start editing and changing these meshes, but we'll keep it quite simple for now. So just in this introductory video, I want to create the most basic tree you could ever create in Blender. So hopefully you can imagine this is the stump of the tree. And let's learn about some other tools. So I could make my stump bigger by pressing S on my keyboard. This is the scale tool. So I can use my mouse to kind of move, and I can make it bigger or I can make it smaller. And of course I can just click if I'm happy with the new scale, and I can obviously Control Z to undo and go back to where I started. Let's say I wanted my stump to be longer. So what I could do is I could scale it, but instead of scaling it in the X, Y, and Z directions, I could just scale it in the Z direction. So that'll let me make it longer. It'll scale along that blue Z axis, right? So if I press S and Z, I can scale it along a particular axis. I could also try the other axes if you want to see how that looks. You've got X, Y, and Z to play with. Good. I'm actually not really going to play around with my stump too much. I'm just going to leave it as is. That's the stump of my tree. And let's go ahead and let's name this mesh, because right now it's just called a cylinder. Why don't we just double click it and call it stump? Just to keep ourselves organized here. All right, our tree is halfway done. Our mediocre loser tree that is really the most basic thing we'll ever make in this course. Let's add some leaves. And I'm going to add a mesh. Do you remember how to add a mesh? Shift A. Go into the mesh menu. And let's add a cone. All right, now we get to really play with our keyboard. Once again, the cone has all of these options. Let's just tune that down to 16. Let's just keep it nice and low poly. And you'll notice my cone is kind of in my cylinder right now. Well, here's another shortcut. If you press G, you can move that mesh around. You can move it freely. However, I want to stay nice and tight. So I'm going to press G and I'm going to press Z so that it locks movement to the Z axis. So I can't move it around the X and Y. I can only move it up and down. So now it's going to stay perfectly on top of my stump, just like that. Okay, these are some pretty lame trees, or pretty lame leaves for my tree. So I'm going to once again press S to scale. And I'm going to scale it in all directions. I'm just going to make it bigger. Da, 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 da. And whatever you fancy, scale your leaves up to that size. Now my leaves have once again come under my stump, so I'm going to press G and I'm going to press Z, and I'm going to move my tree up so that my stump is more visible, and I'm quite happy with this size. But maybe just for fun, I'm gonna scale it down. That the base of the tree looks a little too big. So I'm gonna scale it down, and I'm gonna press G and Z to move it down. Now let's get a little fancy here. I'm going to scale the tree, except I'm gonna scale it once again in just the Z direction. So I can actually stretch it out, and I can kind of make it more elongated. G, Z, move it up. Ta-da. And now I've got quite a visible tree. I think if you asked anyone in this room or anyone who wasn't following this tutorial, they would say that's a tree. All right, so that's the basics of Blender. The last thing I'm going to do is, because I am a good modeler, I'm going to rename this mesh. Instead of it saying cone, I'm going to say leaves or something. And you might notice, well, this tree is one single object, or at least it should be. I don't like that my leaves are not attached to the stump. These should be conjoined, right? The tree is just one piece. So what I can do is I can click either one of these meshes, and I can hold Shift on my keyboard, and I can click another one, and you'll notice I have both meshes selected. And then I could go Control J. And that's going to basically join these two meshes together. You shouldn't ever really join meshes until you are completely done with your modeling. Because we're keeping this simple, I'm fine to join them right now. In my head, I am done modeling this tree. And now I can move it up and down. I can scale it, and both the leaves and the stump are scaling. And maybe now I can just rename this to tree since it is one single entity. Now keep in mind the lines on the plane are kind of like your ground, right? So you might not want to have the tree floating above the ground. You might want to put it nice so that it's sitting on the plane, just like that. That'll be very useful when we come to import this into Unity and make games and stuff with these models. All right, there's your intro to Blender. It only gets tougher from here. Let's save this. So just Control S to save. On your H drive, you should have a 3D modeling and animation folder. So you can just press this button right here if you don't have one. And inside this folder, you could create a Blender folder. And maybe inside this Blender folder, I'm going to call this simple underscore tree. No space, just underscore. Save your Blender file. And there you have it. Now we're done the first tutorial for this portion of the course.